Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Mohit Joshi, and I am an analyst at the National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL. I welcome you all to this webinar on cybersecurity for electrical utilities in India, organized by NREL and Global Power System Transformation Consortium, GPST. NREL is a national lab of the US Department of Energy, focusing research on energy efficiency, sustainable transportation, and renewable power technologies, and provides the knowledge to integrate and optimize energy systems. GPST is a consortium of system operators and leading technical institutions around the world. My colleague David Palchuk will talk more about GPST shortly. The motivation for this webinar comes from the Indian system operators participating in the GPST India Advisory Board, who have identified cybersecurity as an area of importance. Many trends, including increase of renewable energy, increase in automation, need for more communication in systems like automatic generation control, AGC, renewable energy management centers, REMCs, security constraint economic dispatch, SCED, and forthcoming market-based economic dispatch changes the electrical grid's attack surface. All these aspects require new thinking around how best to secure this critical infrastructure. This webinar will provide an overview of the trends and challenges associated with the electrical grid's cybersecurity. Next slide, please. So before moving on to the main presentation, just few housekeeping items. The workshop is being recorded and will be shared with all the attendees. To adjust audio, you can select audio settings from your computer and then check sound output and volume. You can always dial in by phone with the dial-in numbers provided in the registration confirmation email. To ask a question, select Q&A from the Zoom webinar app and then type in question and select send. To make a comment, please use the chat function and send to everyone. Next slide. Before moving to the presentation, I would like to introduce all the panelists. We have 4 panelists today from India and US. We have 2 from National Renewable Energy Lab, 1 from MISO, and then 1 from India. Maurice Martin is a senior cybersecurity research leader at NREL. He has extensive experience working with small and under-resourced utilities on the cybersecurity challenges. Anuj Sanghvi is a cybersecurity researcher and network security engineer at NREL. He leads the research and development of NREL's distributed energy resources cybersecurity framework. Mr. P.K. Agarwal is a power system professional with over 40+ years of experience helping power industries to design and automate electricity market, integrates SCADA system, and OT cybersecurity implementation. He's currently consulting to USAID projects in Central Asia. Jeff Fuller is a senior director, IT security controls at Midcontinent Independent System Operator, MISO. He has more than 20 years of experience in cybersecurity and currently responsible for cybersecurity vulnerability management, identity and access management, asset and configuration management, change management, controls validation. I now invite David Palchuk from NREL to provide an overview of GPST. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Mohit. Hi, everyone. So I'm a researcher at NREL and involved in the GPST consortium, and I've been working with India for many years. So happy to provide this resource for you all. So the Global Power System Transformation Consortium is an expert and practitioner-driven initiative which engages power system operators, research and educational institutes, governments, businesses, and stakeholders in all regions of the world to accelerate clean energy transitions at the ambitious scope and scale that is required. So who is this consortium made up of? The founding system operators represent some of the most advanced and progressive regions of the world in the transition to clean energy. And a lot of this was driven by their vision. So these system operators are driving the development of the consortium mission and activities, which I'll touch on briefly in my next slide. And relevant results from these activities will be shared broadly across all countries. The core team in the bottom left of the triangle is made up of several technical institutions from around the world, and this team is actively developing the core consortium and will be engaged in the implementation of the technical work. In the bottom right, represents developing country system operators, and this is the consortium is partnering with emerging and economy and developing country system operators who will guide the GPST vision and collaborate with the consortium to advance power system transformation across these countries. So why are these partnerships being formed? Ultimately, this is about knowledge sharing, skills sharing across countries, across system operators, because at the end of the day, a lot of the transition will end up on the doorstep of system operators, and they're a very key link in this transformation. Next slide, please. So I'll just go through this very briefly, and I encourage you to dig into this further, and I'll give a link to this on the next slide. So ultimately, the consortium is motivated to advance action in 5 key areas. The first being system operator research and peer learning. This is led by the Energy Systems Integration Group, and this is about performing cutting-edge research, creating novel system operator solutions, and disseminating those learnings throughout our country network and system operator network. Number 2, which is led by NREL, System Operator Technical Assistance. So this is providing some of the implementation support to scale some of these things that we learn through number 1, and scale other things, initiatives that for whatever reason have not taken off at the scale needed to make the smooth transition. Number 3, foundational workforce development. So this is led by the Imperial College of London, and this is about building an inclusive and diverse workforce through enhanced university curriculum. So this is through curriculum development, as well as trainings to help transition system operators to understanding the clean energy challenges. Number 4, localized technology adoption support led by IEEE. So this is helping to understand what might be needed in terms of testing programs and standards that will need to be developed to help this transition go smoothly. And number 5, open data and tools. So this is led by Fraunhofer and VTT. And this is about supporting rigorous planning, operational analysis through open data and tools, and helping to provide a vision for how we transition in modeling the data. So as you can see, there's several institutions that are a part of this transition. There's regional leads with these institutions that are in these regions, and NREL is helping to coordinate that right now as the interim secretariat. You go to the next slide, please. So I just give a very brief overview of the GPST. And this is sort of in nascent stages, and we certainly appreciate you reaching out to us and trying to get involved. So globalpst.org is where you can get a lot of this information and dig into these pillar activities, and also it will be a place where you can access a lot of the knowledge webinars such as this, and other things that will be created through the GPST. So please take a look. Pass things back over to Mohit. Thank you.
Thanks, David, for the useful introduction and overview of GPST. I now invite Maurice Martin and Anuj Sanghvi from NREL to provide overview of trends and challenges related to cybersecurity for electrical utilities. Over to you, Maurice and Anuj.
Thank you, Mohit, and glad to be speaking with everyone this morning or this evening. Next slide, please. And I think we've covered our introductions already, but I've been with NREL for about 5 or 6 years now, and came from an organization called the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, which serves small utilities in the United States. So a lot of my background is working with small utilities and helping them meet the challenges of limited resources and still addressing cybersecurity. And Anuj, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, really quickly. Hello, everyone. My name is Anuj Sanghvi. I've been at the lab about coming up on 4 years now. My background is in electrical engineering, but I had majorly focused on networks and security. And here at the lab, I focus majorly and lead a couple projects, which is the Distributed Energy Resources Cybersecurity Framework, and then consequence-driven analysis for extreme fast charging infrastructure. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So being a research organization, being the cybersecurity center within that organization at NREL, we tend to focus very much on trends and what we see evolving, both in the technology of the grid and in the technology of the attacks that are being launched on the grid. And looking at the industrial control systems trends vis-a-vis cyber attacks, we see a pretty clear progression towards increasing sophistication, going all the way back to 2010 with the uncovering of Stuxnet, which was targeted at the Iranian nuclear facility. We begin to see some a real step up from kind of malware that you see when the attackers are motivated by criminal activities to those levels of sophistication you see when nation states are involved. And Stuxnet really broke a lot of ground, both in terms of the number of zero-day exploits that it utilized, as well as some of the tricks. And one of the most interesting tricks I thought Stuxnet pulled off was that in attacking the equipment that was used in the Iranian nuclear program, particularly the centrifuges, the malware would actually record normal telemetry and send that back to the system control. And then once it began operating the equipment maliciously, it would send normal telemetry back. In other words, it was spoofing the telemetry. So that kind of deception was a pretty big step forward. Havix came out a few years later. It was focused on espionage, not so much on destruction of equipment like Stuxnet, but it did introduce the idea of more sophisticated ways of infiltrating a system. Stuxnet used compromised websites and compromised software updates to gain access to the system. So that's the kind of thing that we're now seeing in other areas and allows for a really widespread compromise. Black Energy, that was responsible for the first attack on the Ukrainian system that occurred in 2015. Not terribly technically sophisticated, depended a lot on remote desktop protocols and other kind of standard attack methodologies. But then a year later, the attack that received less attention in the media, but was much more technically sophisticated, was the Indestroyer or crash override attack. And there you begin to see malware that is using kind of a framework technique so that different operations can be plugged into the malware framework and to do things like compromise specific protocols that might be in use in an ICS system and use multiple backdoors for loading software, that type of thing. And then finally, in 2017, we see the emergence of the Triton malware, which was targeted towards safety instrumentation systems. And what that means is that the objectives of Triton were not just to steal information or disrupt information, but also disrupt physical processes in a way that could be dangerous to human life. So increasing sophistication both in the technology and in the ambition of the attackers, which may lead utilities to feel like they're up against a very intractable problem, that these well-funded attackers might, that they have it's going to be very difficult. But in truth, we see something a little bit different when we dig into some of the recent events. Next slide, please. Looking at a couple from the United States in just the last couple of years, we can see that actually there is a lot of reason to be optimistic about your ability to stand up to cyber attacks. Next slide, please. This is an attack that received a lot of attention here in the US. Colonial Pipeline is a major supplier of petroleum products in the United States. They have a pipeline that extends from all the way from Texas to New Jersey, basically the eastern part of the United States. And it was hit by ransomware in May of this year. It caused a lot of destruction to the supply chain, and you may have seen videos of people in the United States hoarding gasoline and scrambling to fill up their cars and whatnot. But when you pick this apart, you see that the way that the attack progressed was through kind of a standard IT-focused attack, which there's no indication that it actually touched the OT system. The Colonial Pipeline executives decided to turn off OT operations as a way of making sure that their OT systems were not eventually affected, which kind of suggests that maybe they didn't have the kind of IT-OT separation that you want to see, or they didn't have confidence in that air gap. And in fact, the entire attack was dependent on a single compromised user account. So thinking about what that means and what lessons could be learned from that, the organizations should plan for a graceful degradation. In other words, when part of their system is attacked, make sure that there's enough isolation and separation so that the attack doesn't spread. Make sure that there's an IT and OT separation, as well as pre-think what you might do to keep operations progressing, even in the presence of an attack, so that if one part of the system is compromised, you don't have to shut down the whole system and experience the same kind of disruptions that we saw here in the United States from the Colonial Pipeline attack. Next slide, please. Another one that received less attention, probably because in the security alerts, the facility was not mentioned by name, but what we do know that it was a large natural gas compression facility in the United States. It was, again, a case of attackers accessing first the IT network and then pivoting to the OT network. Operations were shut down for 2 days. And this one was a result of a spear phishing campaign. So again, not as much IT-OT separation as we'd like to see. In the reporting on this that came from our government agencies, it came out that the victim did not have emergency response planning. So again, these are things that are not, the defense is not, doesn't have to be terribly advanced. You don't have to keep up with the level of sophistication that we're seeing in the Tritons, in the advanced malware, but maintaining a level of protectiveness in keeping with security best practices. Training your employees against spear phishing by doing security awareness programs and including emergency response planning for cybersecurity in your overall emergency response planning. Next slide, please. So yes, critical infrastructure can be subject to attack, but following best practices can go a long way towards mitigating even the kind of campaigns that we're seeing today. And Anuj, do you have anything to add to this slide?
Yeah, Maurice, and great job just overviewing with those attacks. I just wanted to point out like some of the common trends within those attacks that were targeted to ICS is that not just the malware is affecting the devices, but I think when they do focus on the SCADA operations, it's also the monitoring and the components that's sending back the values and making sure the operators are seeing that value. And so starting with Stuxnet, I think just wanted to focus on the point that even though the malware was inside the system, the operators were looking at the screen that said everything is functioning normally. And that's something to focus on as well, is not just in order to identify such an attack is happening, it's important to look at the overall traffic, what is trying to communicate outside of your internal operational network. And most of the trends and most of these malwares that you discussed did try to contact and call back home. And that's one of the signals that needs to be flagged always, is why does your operational technology device need to call outside of your operational network, right? So just wanted to highlight that point.
Very good. Let's go to the next slide, please. Here at NREL, we focus a lot on renewables, and one of the questions we get a lot is how will the introduction of high levels of renewables change the attack surface that we are trying to defend in our utility. Next slide, please. And a lot of that work focuses on distributed energy resources. If you think small solar installations, small wind installations, batteries, how do these devices that are connected to the grid, but also have some kind of a control system on board and need to be coordinated across large areas, introduce new cyber risk or change the attack surface and give attackers new ways to enter the system. Next slide, please. And so VERs are very popular both in around the world and becoming more so. They offer a lot of advantages to rural areas that may not have transmission and distribution infrastructure. They are popular in places where the supply chain for fuel may not be reliable, or that the fuel may be very expensive, and island communities are certainly a primary example of that, where all the fuel has to be shipped in. And then, of course, environmental concerns, where everyone's more focused on the environment than ever at this point. Next slide, please. So how does the introduction of distributed energy resources affect the attack surface? Well, if you think about all of these new devices being attached to the grid, they all have the ability to impact the stability of the grid and how the system operates. And they usually connect to at least one control network, often back at the utility. Please advance the slide. One way the attack surface changes is just the sheer number of devices that are now attached to the grid. Each of these is a potential point that can be attacked. Next slide, please. And that can, if those devices are attacked, they can then be misoperated to produce disruptive voltage or frequency on the grid. Next slide, please. They can then be used to mount an upstream attack. In other words, pivoting from the local device up to the control network of the utility. Next advance. And in certain circumstances, they can be misoperated in such ways that damage equipment, either the equipment themselves or the larger power equipment, such as transformers. Next slide, please. And Anuj, I think you were going to make a point about this slide.
Correct. Thanks, Maurice. The cybersecurity emphasis on these distributed energy resources is kind of a unique challenge, right? They're not entirely industrial control systems, but they're a part of a bigger umbrella. And so the figure here tries to explain like the overlap between what utilities and what are the general practices that utilities can leverage. So I think one of the research areas here at NREL that we are conducting is looking into these guidances which are already available. But then each utility would have to understand what is it that they can use and what does these best practices that are out there mean for these renewable energy assets. So when it comes to PV arrays or battery systems, like Maurice was just explaining, you cannot just take ICS best practices as it is. So you kind of have to do a tailoring process for your own self. And one of the points that I wanted to add before was there are multiple actors involved for DER. So it's the operators, the maintenance personnel, the facilities DER management system, right? And there's a level of access provided to each one of these actors. And that is also a factor that makes it challenging for the cybersecurity aspects of securing these DERs. So.
Thank you, Anuj.
Of course.
Yeah, and we're running a little bit over our time allotment, so I just want to introduce a couple of things, and then we'll turn over the rest of the presentation. But next slide, please. We have a couple of, actually go two more, please. We have a couple of resources designed to help utilities address their cybersecurity and to create a well-rounded cybersecurity program. What we've seen in the past is some utilities tend to overbuild their security programs in some areas and underbuild them in others. So one of the resources we've created is the Power Sector Cybersecurity Building Blocks, which kind of divides a security program into clusters of related activities. Next slide, please. And this is kind of a diagram of it. The URL will be for this document is on the last slide in this series, but we'll also post it in the chat. And basically, it's designed to help utilities kind of think through a lot of the organizational challenges around cybersecurity and address some of the areas that often go unaddressed. Next slide, please. And Anuj, maybe you can speak to the DERSIF.
Yeah, and really quickly, this is one of the frameworks that I was mentioning, the Distributed Energy Resources Cybersecurity Framework. So it's not just a framework, it's also an online tool available to everybody. It's free of cost. And it's an interactive application that navigates through at least what we think is a comprehensive self-assessment for any organization or utility. Obviously focuses on distributed energy resources and those three main pillars that I just want to mention is the governance, so the processes and policies that an organization has to incorporate cybersecurity into. Then we have technical management security assessment that talks about like the technical controls and what have you. And then also we look at the security from the physical security assessment point of view. So how do you enhance the physical security when it does come to legacy equipment and you have to have physical protection in order to completely secure it. So it's accessible. There's a link in the chat. So feel free to leverage it.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And NREL is able to provide technical assistance to utilities. Please reach out to either Anuj or I if you're interested in any of the topics here. We are already engaged in that, helping utilities and improve their cybersecurity stance in the Caribbean, and would welcome the opportunity to engage with any of you on the call today. So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Maurice and Anuj. I just want to remind our participants today that they can send their questions at any time through Q&A section of this webinar. We'll take up all the questions at the end of this webinar through panel discussion. I now invite Jeff Fuller, Senior Director, IT Security Controls from MISO, to share experience of MISO with cybersecurity. Over to you, Jeff.
Thank you. Go ahead to the next slide. We'll just jump right in since we're running slightly behind. Go ahead, next slide. So a little bit about MISO. I start with this slide on the MISO security program and some guiding principles. MISO is an independent system operator in North America. We have we're serving about 43 million people. We have a couple hundred members. Some of our members are very large utilities. Clearly, they have very robust, mature cybersecurity programs, but many of our members are much smaller. And as a guiding principle, as ourselves, we consider having a very mature, strong cybersecurity program. We have a strong outreach program for our members, and we want to ensure that as much as possible, we're able to assist our members on an ongoing basis. Cybersecurity is not only an organizational effort, it's security in general, I should say, but particularly cybersecurity is not only an organizational effort. It's one of those that it's literally everybody's job. It's everybody's job throughout IT. It's part of the ongoing training program for all of our end users. And it's one of those things that for all of our members, it's something that we continuously want to reach out and strive for giving assistance. And for those that request assistance, we are always there for our members at all times. And it's something that we really pride ourselves on, and being able to turn and help our members. And go ahead to the next slide. As I go into talking a little bit about our adversaries in the cybersecurity space, one thing as I get into this a little bit, I specifically did not go into the cyber criminal organizations that we see out there. We can save some of that for the Q&A. I think the hot topic today, ransomware, the effects of ransomware, that pretty common. You know, we can get into a conversation around script kiddies and things like that. Really what I wanted to focus here a little more on are the more formalized nation states. Maurice did a really good job of teeing up some of the more formalized activities we've seen globally. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those nation state actors that are out there. Everything that I'm going to talk about here, though, is what we would call open source material. While MISO does have access to what we would consider classified material, nothing that is in the presentation or that will be accessible to you guys after the presentation isn't available to you, what we would consider open source. So let's go ahead to the next slide and let's talk about some of our friends out there. First one, Iran, referred to as APT 33. Iran's been around for a while here. Very common to see spearphishing emails from Iran. Iran likes to use HTML applications with their spearphishing. Iran has shown a particular interest in energy sector organizations. Personally, here at MISO, we have seen semi-recently spearphishing emails targeted at John Baer, who happens to be our CEO. As recently as in the last 6 months, we have an open case actually still ongoing. So that's kind of interesting for us here. APT 34 is another Iranian actor. Probably one of the longer term operations. APT 34, though, is believed to be more focused on reconnaissance efforts, at least since 2014. Oh, sorry, my computer locked up on me there for just a second. In its latest campaign, APT 34 was utilizing, sorry, my computer keeps locking up, I apologize. APT 34 was leveraging a Microsoft Office vulnerability. I won't give you the CVEs, you can look those up yourself. But it's a remote 0-day, it was a remote 0-day, duh. And then PowerShell, if you're not familiar with PowerShell, PowerShell is a Microsoft tool for command line PowerShell tool, sorry. Next one, hopefully this one goes smoother on my computer. AP28, Fancy Bear, Cozy Bear from Russia. So one of the ones been around the longest, probably not a big surprise to anybody. And AP29, I need more coffee this morning. Let's see, so AP29, probably one of the most evolved groups that have been around. Very common using network CNC traffic, which is command and control for communications. Typically using social media initially as a vector to get in, likes GitHub cloud storages for the CNC traffic. Was attributable, although when we talk about attribution, and Maurice teed it up with Black Energy earlier, was attributable to Black Energy in 2014. Eternal Blue, if you recognize Eternal Blue was one of the US National Security Agency tools that was supposedly leaked by shadow brokers in 2017 that was used to create WannaCry. This was also attributed to APT 29 and its use as well. Let's go ahead to the next slide. So North Korea, APT 37, as well as APT 38. Let's see, so APT 37, well, relatively high confidence, malware activities being carried out with them going back to Lazarus. If you recognize Lazarus, the Sony Picture attack as well. I'm sorry, my computer keeps locking up and this makes this dreadfully bad. This is bad, I'm sorry. This is terrible.
For what it's worth, Jeff, we can hear you just fine, and see you just fine. So I don't know if that makes it.
Yeah, but I think it's. One more time. All right, let's try that again. All right, so APT 38 is attributed to operations in at least 16 countries as of late. It's demonstrated the desire to maintain access to the victims during, yeah, there it goes again. Am I good?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. All right, try it again.
Are you able to see your slide on my screen, Jeff?
Isabel?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Are you able to see the screen?
Jeff, are you able to hear us? Okay, it seems like we have some issues with Jeff. So maybe we can move on to the next presentation and then try to reconnect Jeff and then take it up from there. So Mr. Agarwal, I now invite you for your presentation, and we'll take up Jeff's presentation later. Over to you, Mr. Agarwal.
Okay, so I think this presentation, hello everyone, I think this introduction already been done, so we can move to the next slides. This is a brief overview of the Indian power system. This is one of the largest single synchronized grids. So we have, as per capacity, we are third, but as a single synchronized grid, we are the first, because other China and US, they have multiple grids. Federal structure, both state and central government has equal stake on the electricity. 5 electrical regions we have, and 6 control central level control center, so which are under POSOCO, Power System Operation Corporation, which is a national system operator, and then 5 regional control centers. So then 34 state control centers which are owned by the state as a federal structure. All are connected in hierarchical fashion, though this is unlike other, they are peer-to-peer, but in India they are connected in hierarchical. So all data comes to national control center, and we use a dedicated optical fiber for communication link. These are certain figures for the Indian power sector: 370 gigawatt plus capacity, 182 gigawatt plus generating capacity, 87 gigawatt plus renewable, and very big circuit kilometers, 425,000 circuit kilometers. Next slide, please. So these are the OT and IT systems which are used in grid control centers in India. So all about 39 control center uses this type of things. So first is the SCADA system, which is everywhere used. Then we have implemented wide area measurement system, which is a very big system. I think it is biggest in Asia or biggest in world also, because it has 1600 PMUs installed at each and every substation power station in India. We have implemented renewable energy management center. Basically, they are the separate SCADA system for RE energy renewable centers, but they are not in all over. There are only 11 renewable centers which has been implemented in the RE state. Then many IT systems which are tightly integrated with the OT systems, and they are as important as the OT system of grid operation. Scheduling system is also a synchronized system. Short-term open access, security constraint economic dispatch at the National Control Center, outage management system at each RLDC and SLDCs. SLDCs are state load dispatch centers. National Open Access Registry is being implemented, which is a single online system for the open access management and all the other market management in India. And Renewable Energy Certificate Registry, which is maintained by NLDC. So we see this OT and IT both are there, and they are tightly integrated, and most of the applications are synchronized. So about like web-based scheduling, they are all synchronized. All 5 RLDC and 1 NLDC, they are working in synchronized manner. So cybersecurity is very, very important thing, and any DDoS attack might hamper the grid operation. Next, please. So because of this, we have many cybersecurity initiatives in India. So first was the last upgrade which happened in 2014. We upgraded all our architecture of SCADA system. So previously it was a flat architecture. I have slide, I will show you that. And now it is as per IEC 62443 standard. They are zone and conduit method used as for segmentation of LAN. So they are segmented LAN segmented with firewall. Routine BAPT we have included in the vendor scope. They are doing this BAPT with the getting BAPT done from authorized tester, like from certain. And then we have backup control center, and backup control center has fully similar system located at different place where the main RLDC is located. Like for NLDC, we see that it is located in Calcutta. It is far away. It is about more than 1,000 kilometers. And these backup control center are getting data directly from the source, not only from the backup main control center, but they are also synchronized. Sectoral CERT has been established. Computer response emergency response team has been established separately for generation, hydro generation, transmission, distribution, and now for system operation they are also making a separate CERT. So which CERT coordinates all the activities specific for the generation or transmission or distribution system. SCADA systems or REMC or IT systems, they have been declared as a national critical information infrastructure. So after this declaration, they get a special status system, and they are being monitored for any attack by NCIAPPC. NCIAPC is the National Critical Information Infrastructure Council, which is directly under PMO, and certain. So both are now continuously monitoring, and any attack they are advised to us. And that compliance is monitored by POSOCO. So as a POSOCO is the main coordinator for the CERT system operation, so they are also monitoring the compliance for each advisory issued by NCIPC. Implementation of CCMP, Cybersecurity Crisis Management Plan, has been implemented especially for cybersecurity. Geo-filtering in firewall has been put up by design. Next slide, please. So this is the legacy system architecture which was here before 2014. You can see that everything is on a single LAN and they are not segmented. So attack surface has increased. Next slide, please. with this, this is the upgraded architecture of our SCADA system. Here we have segmented all the different LAN, like it is a DTS LAN. DTS is dispatcher training simulator. Data acquisition LAN is separately, which was getting data from RTU. SCADA EMS LAN, which is the core LAN, having all the SCADA system and SCADA servers and EMS servers. And then ICCP LAN is a separate LAN. So there has been zone has been made, and each zone has very limited traffic, limited required traffic between these zones. So this is as per diagram as per IEC 62443. Next slide, please. So when the requirement of sharing the data has been implemented as per this diagram. This is diagram from the standard, but this our implementation is like this. So we have included a data replica server. So whatever data is being shared with the other stakeholders through internet or through corporate LAN, we are getting all the data from inside SCADA server to the replica server. And this is only one-way traffic. You can see this is only one-way traffic, and all the data which is required to share is coming from inside to outside. So there is no traffic from outside to inside like this. We are safely sharing all the data to different stakeholders. Even data to our system, in our corporate system also goes through this. This is a diagram from IEC 62443, and similarly we have implemented in our system. Next slide, please. And we have created a strategy for the cybersecurity, and which is an informal thing, which is not formalized still. And so secure by governance, all the policies that everything, BCPs, business continuity plan, procedures, and do's and don'ts, we are following from the ISO 27001. So POSOCO and other RLDC, they are compliance with for ISO 27001 since last 10 years. So this all the governance system is through this requirement of this ISO 27001. And the secure by design, as you have seen that we have segmented all the LAN from the flat LAN to segmented LAN. So we have adopted 62443. So this has been take care of security during the design itself, and with the 62351 we are using the secure ICCP. So secure ICCP again, it is by design. Then secure by implementation. Secure by implementation means whenever we are procuring the SCADA systems, we put in our bid that all the systems should be hardened system. There should not be any open service or any application which is not required for the SCADA system. And these are being made a part of, so in the next bid document this has been done, and cybersecurity will be the part of FAT and SAT. FAT is Factory Acceptance Test, and SAT acceptance test. So cybersecurity will also be taken care during the implementation. So whatever design has been done, it should also be implemented. Otherwise there was no use of design change. So it will be implemented and tested for that. Secure by controls. There are many controls like application whitelisting. Application whitelisting already been done for all the RLDC. So all the applications or services which are not required for working of SCADA, like there may be a Adobe Acrobat. So we have taken out all these type of applications because they will not be a part of the main patch management system. Otherwise, if something is required, they can be installed on the SCADA system, but with the approval and inclusion in the patch management system. Otherwise, this becomes a hassle for the cybersecurity of SCADA system. Secure by operation. Monitoring, detection, respond, and acting during operation. This is so as I mentioned before that SCADA system operation is the critical information infrastructure and being monitored by NC, IIPC, and CERTIN. And we are also monitoring log and detect and respond. So fast detection and fast response is the key. So we are also doing the incidence monitoring. incident handling system. Next, please. These are the challenges because skilled manpower in IT cybersecurity is so many, but especially for OT security and power system OT security is really getting difficult because still is a new area for them. Skilled vendor also. So most of the vendor I have seen that they are very expert on IT system, but cybersecurity of IT and OT is really much different. Both systems are much different, and this is a challenge for this. Dealing with multiple coordination agencies. Generally, we have many coordinating agencies in India, and all are more oriented to more compliance. So compliance is really so difficult thing. Is just if we are putting all the compliance, and it gives the false sense of security. So this is again a challenge, that to be complied and to be technically controlled system is really difficult. Awareness of users and stakeholders. So if you are not aware about your users and stakeholders are not aware, then it becomes a weakest point in the system. So awareness is a daily challenge for this, even users and stakeholders also. Every alert initiate panic in administration and moving towards more compliance. So this is challenges which are being faced by the Indian power system since last 1 year, when the red eco activity was found in Indian grid, and then we are moving to more compliance. So again, it's more stealing the time of our technical persons, and they are getting less time for doing the technical job on the cybersecurity. Awareness training is not user oriented, because our grid operators requires different type of awareness training, our stakeholders require different type of training. So customized training has to be, and the work is going on this direction. Sparing manpower for training are really difficult, because if you want to train them, then you should have the extra manpower in our control center, which is required 24/7 hours. Next slide, please. These are the ongoing efforts. All these challenges efforts are going on to overcome these challenges. Cybersecurity is a separate functional area. This is being declared, and there will be, until now it was an additional job. CISO was an additional job of a person who is already engaged in other activity of the main functional area. So now it is being created as a separate department for CISO or cybersecurity. Cybersecurity on regular agenda on the board. As I was director and CISO at that time, so it was started that time, and now again it is being made as a regular agenda on the board. So where they will not see the technical details of the cybersecurity, they will see the risk and status of the various initiative in the power sector, especially POSOCO. Separate sectoral CERT for system operation is already being declared. I think it has been declared also. Now POSOCO is the central point for this CERT system operation. Development for end-to-end cybersecurity is taking place. POSOCO is having efforts doing customized cybersecurity for the Indian system, because we are hierarchical connected, number of control centers are very high, and they are distributed system also. Reduction in compliance and more emphasis on risk. So CISO directly reports to CMD. Graded awareness training. Customized awareness training is being created for the different level of stakeholders or different level of users, and this is already in progress. Cybersecurity risk also to be a part of enterprise risk management. So previously it was not there, now it is being a part of enterprise risk management. So all the risk-based risk-based assessment will be overviewed by directors and board. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my last slide. There are some points to ponder, and I think this is common for all and common for everywhere, every utility of. So management has a false sense of security with mere nomination of CISO. So nomination of CISO is generally, it was being taken as the management thought that after we have nominated a CISO, though now we have become secure. So CISO is not a magician. Cybersecurity needs to be a culture in organization, because cybersecurity is not only the responsibility of CISO, it is the responsibility for each and every person in the or even the associates. So a culture has to be developed in a cybersecurity in the organization, as there is no, it is not a one-time job, but there is no 100%, there was no absolute security also. Cybersecurity has to be main functional area, which is already being done and regular board agenda. User awareness is the key, otherwise the human element, which may be very strongest, it becomes a weakest link, and cybersecurity is as strong as a weakest link in the organization. So if our user is not aware, there no control, technical control will work on this. Internal cybersecurity breach is dangerous. So this is to be dealt with seriously. In my view, it is intentional or intentional. Both should be dealt with seriously, and is to be taken either by having more awareness training or by punishment also. Over compliance steals technical person's time and efforts and give management a false sense of security, because if we are doing all the compliance, again it gives a false sense of security. So minimize compliance and maximize implementation. CISO is the most helpless person in the present environment. So please help the CISO, all the users and associates, by keeping in mind do's and don'ts and then following all the rules and policies. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Agarwal. So in the interest of time, I'll just go back to Jeff for one slide that he wants to cover, and then we'll move quickly to the Q&A session. Over to you, Jeff.
Great, thank you. And I apologize for the connection issue, but I've switched connections. So the deck will be available. Really where that deck was leading me is to this slide, and very quickly here on the top half of this slide, to point out what you can see here is over just a couple year period where we're tracking from last year, the number of events that our SIM is consuming is steadily increasing, and already this year, if I were pulling up our current numbers, we're already surpassing, or on track, well on track to surpass the number of events that our SIM is consuming, right? Now, I will point out where you see 0 reportable cybersecurity incidents. In the United States, we have regulatory requirements on our ICS EMS type of networks that require reportable cyber incidents to our regulators versus cybersecurity incidents that are differently classified. We have had cybersecurity incidents that are not regulated, reportable. So those are separate type of incidents that we have had. We've just had none that have involved our EMS type of networks. Below there are some statistics from 2020 on the number of threat alerts so all those billion of events that have come through, when you filter through those that are consumed by the SIM, as those get filtered through and consumed, out of those billions, you can see that we've actually had, or in 2020, obviously, 2,600 and some change that were true threat alerts. Of those, you can see the internal versus externals as we've worked through those. Out of those couple thousands, when those are filtered through, we actually turned those down to 153 that turned into what we refer to as hunts. Hunts for us are a type of investigation where we have a specialized team that digs into the network and goes to search either for a particular type of malware. In one particular case, we had a financial case where a user was using his company machine to access his personal bank and had clicked a link. So there was a company machine to a personal type of event type of thing, but we assist our users even in cases like that. So just very quickly, I know I only had a minute with the way things turned out, but the takeaway here is we have those adversaries that you can go take a look at. And as you can see, there is nothing but an increase in events. And I can tell you, even going into 2021, we are still on an upswing. So there's no downturn to the events that are taking place. Very quickly, Mohit, there's what I got for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. So we have 10 minutes left, so quickly move on to the Q&A session. I hand it over to Anuj to moderate the panel discussion. Over to you, Anuj.
Thanks, Mohit, and thanks to all of our panelists. I have a few questions lined up here, so let's get into it. I guess the first question, and I'll point it to Maurice, is one of the biggest cybersecurity challenges amongst utilities around the world, and I think we can share some experience from your assessment with the under-resourced utilities. So, Maurice, did you want to take on that?
I think it's something that Mr. Agarwal touched on, is the number of skilled workers available to implement security and to mount security responses. We see a global shortage of skilled security professionals. And it's especially challenging in a field such as utilities, because utilities are very technical in and of themselves. And then we also want someone who understands the utility and also understands the cybersecurity, and finding those individuals can be very, very challenging. One kind of adjunct question to that is it better to train security folks to understand utility operations, or train utility operators to understand security? Any way you can get there is good. I would say there's a lot of opportunity to train utility folks to better understand security. They already understand the utility side of it, and adding security skills to their skill set can only help your organization. But I'd like to hear from the other panelists if they have thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I guess a follow-up question to that, and I pointed to Praveen sir, Mr. Agarwal sir, is you mentioned about several challenges in India related to cybersecurity. I guess in your opinion, what would be like the biggest challenge, and kind of like prioritizing? You mentioned awareness, you mentioned following of guidelines and standards, and just adding on compliance. And I really like the point about what if you're spending so much time being compliant, but then at the end, not being able to fully secure the system. And so how would you prioritize amongst those? Praveen sir, you're still on mute.
So as I mentioned in my presentation also, in the first challenge is the skilled manpower. Because during my tenure as a CISO, I used to get many vendors. But within 15 of half an hour discussion, I becomes bored. So every time they talk security, cybersecurity from the IT point of view. I could not get any vendor till I was in service, retired in 2020, June 2020. The person or vendor who is having good knowledge of power system, and then he is offering his product. So this is skilled manpower and skilled vendors also. Of course, that is manpower. The second is the awareness. Because whatever security technical controls you are putting, if your person or your associate or your user is not aware, that becomes useless. Now, as a whitelisting, application whitelisting we have done, it, our users are not aware, so the person who is mentoring SCADA, he can again install the application there, which is not required for his work, but not required for working of SCADA system. So these two are the biggest challenge, and then again, whatever product they were offering, I never saw that it is an end-to-end product. So either they will monitor some point, or they will monitor IP address, or so. I think I started that we should have a customized end-to-end framework, which is some of the points I mentioned in my. Now it is again going on. Now my successor CISO has already been put some good organization from India, and they are developing a framework. So this is the third thing, that security should be cybersecurity should be end-to-end. Not is only some part like router monitoring and monitoring. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Praveen sir. Great points. The other question I had, and I think I can point this to Jeff, not to put you on the spot or anything, but what has been the major learning from MISO's cybersecurity related experience? Did you want to take that, Jeff?
The major learning is it's ever ongoing, right? It's truly, you got to view it as a journey, right? Every event is different, right? Our end users, and it's been touched on here, right? Our end users are our weakest link. The human element is always the biggest challenge. The training cannot be understated enough or overstated enough. And understated is probably the wrong way to say that. It can't be overstated enough. Training. On one of the slides I didn't get to, we talk about our phishing exercises. We hammer phishing exercises here at MISO. Hammer it, and they're very complex, right? When we first started several years ago, they were pretty easy. Now we have some of the most complex phishing exercises that I would challenge people anywhere else to do. But it has resulted in really, really excellent results.
Okay, great. And I think one of the interesting questions that I have here is, I think it's a broad-ended question, is a centralized approach versus a decentralized approach, and which one is better? And I think I'll state a couple points that I have in mind looking at that question is, when it comes to DERs, right? So these renewable energy assets, they're meant to be distributed. So it's a decentralized approach by design, but when it comes to the legacy equipment and the way the grid has been operating, historically, it was more of a centralized approach. So it's, and when you look at holistically, when you look at implementing cybersecurity solutions to kind of this hybrid architecture, it makes you think, what is the best solution for yourself? So I kind of want to open it up to any panelist that has ideas or thoughts on this. Is how would you deal with cybersecurity with a centralized system or a decentralized system, and which one would be better in your opinion?
Can I take up?
Of course.
Yeah, so in Indian system is a hybrid system. Even the operation, because it is a federal structure and all states are responsible for their area, but also being monitored by the NLDC and RLDCs. So in India also, I was the CISO at POSOCO, but each unit, each RLDC was having the CISO, and then each SLDC is having the CISO. So it is in my view, it should be a hybrid approach for the security. So each state is responsible for their area of concern, and then RLDC is monitoring all and coordinating all the states, and the NLDC coordinating all the RLDCs and states. And as far as this cybersecurity, you have DERs. DRs generally connected to the edge of the grid, and they are connected in the distribution system. So there is a need of DSO, because still we don't have DSO. We have distribution utility, which is more is a supplier type of thing, and they are more concerned on cyber billing and collection. But we should have a DSO. Only the DSO can take care of the cybersecurity of DERs, because DERs are not connected to the RLDC or SLDCs. They are all the grid connected resources.
Correct.
I would agree with that. I think a hybrid approach is what's needed now, and will even more so as more of the grid becomes automated. There will be a need to both respond locally to cyber incidents as well as report and coordinate upstream. So, and this is actually something that we're thinking about at NREL, is how to have that both autonomous, localized responses in real time, and also the higher level upstream analysis required to really understand what has happened.
Great. Great. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, Praveen and Maurice. I do notice that we are out of time. So Mohit, I'm going to pass it on to you to see if there are any more questions, or if you want to move over to wrapping up.
Thanks, Anuj. I don't think we have much time left, so we should wrap it up. So thanks everyone for your participation today. Special thanks to our panelists for sparing time and giving their valuable information for this webinar. We'll share the slides and recording of today's webinar with all of you. Please do check our website of GPST for future events and webinars. Thank you everyone for your time today. Looking forward to see you again. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.